There are moments in life that arrive quietly, yet carry the weight of eternity within them. Most people overlook these moments because they do not come wrapped in spectacle or noise, but heaven often whispers before it moves. What unfolds on Friday is not merely an event on a calendar. It is a revelation for those who have learned to listen beyond appearances. If your spirit has felt restless, if your heart has sensed a strange anticipation, then this message may be the very thing you were meant to hear before the appointed hour arrives. There is a peculiar way in which regret enters a person's life. It rarely arrives as the result of a dramatic act of defiance. More often, it slips in through the quiet door of neglect. People imagine that their greatest mistakes will come from choosing the wrong path. Yet many discover that their deepest sorrows come from failing to notice the path that was already being illuminated before them. A human heart has an extraordinary ability to ignore. It does not wish to confront. We can hear a warning and call it a coincidence. We can sense a conviction and dismiss it as emotion. It can recognize a divine prompting and postpone our response until the opportunity has vanished beyond our reach. A chosen one must understand that God often speaks long before he acts visibly. The pattern appears throughout life. First comes the whisper, then the unfolding. First comes the invitation, then the revelation. Yet many wait for thunder when heaven is speaking in a still and quiet voice. They expect certainty before obedience, signs before trust, and proof before faith. In doing so, they place themselves in a dangerous position. Not because God has abandoned them, but because they have become accustomed to overlooking the very messages designed to guide them. There is something within human nature that prefers comfort over attention. A warning frequently asks us to change direction, examine our motives. Release our pride, or prepare or something unfamiliar. None of these things feel convenient. Therefore, a mind searches for reasons to disregard what the spirit has already recognized as important. We tell ourselves there will be another opportunity. Another reminder, another chance to listen. Yet the tragedy of many lives is not that they never received guidance. It is that they received it repeatedly and failed to honor it. Imagine a traveler approaching a bridge while signs along the road indicate that the structure ahead is unstable. The signs are not obstacles. They are acts of mercy. They exist to preserve the traveler from harm. Yet if the traveler becomes annoyed by the warnings and chooses to ignore them, the fault does not lie with the signs. In much the same way, divine warnings are expressions of care. They are evidence that heaven is concerned enough to intervene before consequences arrive. What appears restrictive is often protective. What seems inconvenient may be the very thing preserving a future. Blessing. Many chosen ones are standing in seasons where subtle warnings have already appeared. Perhaps there has been an uneasiness about a certain relationship. Perhaps there has been a repeated conviction about a habit that needs to change. Perhaps there has been an inner prompting to pursue a calling that has been delayed for too long. These impressions may seem small. But spiritual realities often begin in small ways. A seed is easily overlooked before it becomes a tree. A spark appears insignificant before it becomes a flame. The beginnings of divine direction are frequently humble enough to be ignored by those who are not paying attention. The danger is not merely missing information. The danger is allowing the heart to become dull to the voice that provides it. Every ignored warning makes the next warning easier to dismiss. Every postponed response weakens sensitivity. Over time, a person can become so accustomed to delay that obedience itself begins to feel unusual. The soul drifts not because it intended to wander, but because it gradually stopped listening. This is why discernment is more valuable than mere intelligence. Intelligence can analyze circumstances, but discernment recognizes meaning. Intelligence can explain events after they happen, but discernment often perceives what is approaching before it arrives. A chosen one who learns to listen carefully develops an awareness that protects, guides, and prepares them for what others never see coming. Even now, there are those who sense that something significant is drawing near. The feeling cannot be fully explained. It exists beneath the surface of ordinary life, like distant thunder beyond the horizon. The wise do not dismiss such moments lightly. They pay attention to the convictions, the promptings, the repeated impressions. and the quiet urgings that continue returning to their spirit, because heaven rarely repeats a message without purpose and rarely sends a warning. Without a reason that it's closer than it appears, and this is precisely why Friday cannot be treated as just another day passing through the calendar. Most people measure their lives by dates and schedules, believing that one day is much the same as the next. Yet there are moments when a particular day becomes more than 24 ordinary hours. It becomes a point of convergence, a place where unseen preparation meets visible manifestation. Long before an event unfolds in the natural world, movements are already taking place beneath the surface. What appears sudden to human eyes is often the result of processes that have been developing quietly for weeks, months, or even years. A chosen one must understand that divine timing operates differently from human expectation. We often imagine that God works according to our preferred schedules. We ask why something has not happened yet, why an answer has been delayed, or why a promise remains unfulfilled. What we fail to recognize is that preparation is itself a form of progress. While we focus on the visible outcome, heaven focuses on the conditions necessary for that outcome to endure. A blessing received too early can become a burden. An opportunity entered prematurely can lead to confusion. There are seasons when waiting is not evidence of denial, but evidence of wisdom. Friday represents more than a date. It symbolizes the moment when preparation begins to reveal its purpose. Consider how often in life the most important developments occur long before anyone notices them. A tree grows unseen beneath the soil before it emerges above ground. The roots spread in darkness before the branches reach toward the sky. To an observer, the appearance of the tree seems sudden, but the reality is that growth was occurring all along. A visible manifestation simply caught up with the invisible process. Many chosen ones are living in that invisible process right now. I've been waited, struggled, questioned and persevered. There have been ukkies when nothing seemed to be changing. There have been moments when silence appeared to replace direction. Yet silence does not always indicate inactivity. Sometimes it indicates that foundations are being strengthened where human eyes cannot reach. God often performs his most important work in places where applause cannot follow and recognition cannot interfere. What makes Friday different is not necessarily what the world will see, it is what the prepared spirit will recognize. Two people can witness the same event and walk away with entirely different understandings. One sees coincidence, the other sees confirmation. One notices circumstances, the other perceives purpose. The difference is not in the event itself, but in the condition of the heart observing it. The chosen are often distinguished not by what happens around them, but by their ability to discern what those events truly mean. There are moments when years of uncertainty suddenly begin to make sense. Situations that once appeared disconnected reveal themselves as parts of a larger design. Delays that felt frustrating are understood as protection. Closed doors that seemed unfair are recognized as acts of guidance. What looked like loss becomes preparation. What felt like abandonment becomes positioning. The human mind often seeks immediate explanations. But divine wisdom frequently provides understanding only when the appointed time arrives. This is why anticipation should replace anxiety. Anxiety demands answers before they are ready. Anticipation trusts that answers are approaching even when they cannot yet be seen. The chosen one who understands this principle does not waste energy fearing what Friday may bring. Instead, they remain attentive, knowing that significant moments often arrive disguised as ordinary circumstances. Heaven rarely announces its movements with the spectacle people expect. More often, it allows events to unfold naturally so that only those who have been listening will recognize their significance. Perhaps that is why so many people miss turning points in their lives. They are looking for dramatic signs while overlooking meaningful details. They expect transformation to arrive with overwhelming foes. Yet transformation frequently begins with a conversation, an opportunity, a realization, or a revelation that appears small at first glance. The greatest changes are often introduced quietly. They enter through doors that seem insignificant until one looks back and realizes everything began there. For some chosen ones, a Friday will bring clarity where confusion once existed. For others, it will expose truths that have remained hidden. Some will receive confirmation regarding a decision they have wrestled with for months. Others will notice circumstances shifting in ways they did not anticipate. What makes the day important is not merely the events themselves, but the timing behind them. Certain developments only reveal their meaning when all the necessary pieces have been arranged. The challenge is remaining awake enough to recognize the moment when it arrives. A prepared heart sees significance where an unprepared heart sees routine. A listening spirit detects purpose where others perceive chance. And when the appointed hour finally arrives, the chosen often realize that what appeared to begin on Friday had actually been set into motion long before they ever noticed its approach. With countless unseen details aligning themselves toward a destination that was drawing closer with every passing day, every unanswered question, every silent season, and every step taken in faith despite the absence of visible evidence. And when a person begins to understand this truth, another realization emerges. What is about to unfold did not begin this week, nor did it start when the first signs became visible. A reality is that much of what shapes our future is already in motion long before we become aware of it. Human beings tend to judge progress by what they can see, touch, and measure. Yet some of the most significant movements in life occur beyond the reach of immediate observation. God is rarely idle during seasons that appear quiet. In fact, the periods that seem the most uneventful are often the periods in which the greatest preparations are taking place. Many chosen ones have spent months questioning whether anything was happening at all. They looked at their circumstances and found little evidence of advancement. They prayed for direction and received silence. I sought confirmation and encountered delay. They expected visible breakthroughs, yet the landscape around them appeared unchanged. What they could not see was that heaven was operating in places beyond their field of vision. While they were focused on what had not happened, countless details were already being arranged. There is a tendency to believe that only visible activity matters. We assume that progress must announce itself in obvious ways, yet consider how much of life depends upon processes hidden from sight. The heart beats without asking for recognition. Her seeds develop beneath the soil without attracting attention. Foundations support entire structures while remaining buried beneath the ground. A hidden work is not less important than the visible work. Often it is more important because everything that appears later depends upon what was established earlier. This principle applies to spiritual seasons as well. God frequently prepares opportunities before introducing them. He shapes character before granting responsibility. He develops wisdom before opening doors that require it. If blessings arrived before preparation was complete, many people would be overwhelmed by the very things they once prayed to receive. The delay they feared was often the protection they needed. Some chosen ones imagine that because they cannot trace God's movements, those movements do not exist. Yet a child may not understand how a building is constructed. Simply by looking at a finished structure, there are architects, engineers, laborers, calculations, and plans involved long before the building stands complete. Likewise, there are divine arrangements taking place behind circumstances that human understanding cannot fully grasp. Conversations are occurring, hearts are changing, obstacles are being removed, lessons are being learned, connections are being positioned. Even disappointments that seemed meaningless may have served a purpose that has not yet become apparent. What is remarkable is how often people recognize these hidden preparations only in retrospect. Looking backward, I suddenly see patterns that were invisible while they were living through them. They notice how one delay prevented a greater problem. They understand why a certain relationship ended. They realize why a particular opportunity never materialized. What once seemed random begins to reveal order. What appeared chaotic begins to display intention. The chosen. One must learn to trust this unseen activity even before the evidence becomes visible. Faith is not merely believing when the outcome is obvious. Faith is maintaining confidence while the process remains hidden. It is trusting that silence is not abandonment. It is believing that unseen work is still work. It is recognizing that preparation can continue even when progress appears absent. Perhaps there have been moments recently when certain thoughts continued returning to your mind. Perhaps specific opportunities have begun appearing unexpectedly. Perhaps conversations have unfolded in ways that seem strangely significant. Maybe doors that were once firmly closed have begun to loosen. These developments may appear unrelated at first glance. But hidden work often reveals itself through subtle signs before larger manifestations arrive. Small movements frequently precede major shifts. Many people overlook these indicators because they are waiting for dramatic evidence. They expect the entire picture to appear at once. Yet God often reveals his plans gradually. A single piece appears, then another, then another. Only later does the full image become clear. This gradual unfolding serves a purpose. It teaches dependence rather than control. It develops trust rather than certainty. It invites participation rather than mere observation. A chosen who remain attentive during these seasons begin to notice something remarkable. What they once considered delays start revealing themselves as preparation. What felt like detours begin showing signs of direction. Even painful experiences that seemed unnecessary begin contributing to a larger purpose. Nothing is wasted in the hands of God. Every lesson, every challenge, every season of waiting can become material for a future that is still taking shape. While many are focusing on what has not yet arrived, heaven continues arranging details that cannot be seen from a human perspective. Paths are crossing that have not yet artet. Answers are approaching that have not yet been recognized. Circumstances are shifting beneath the surface in ways that will only become apparent when the appointed moment arrives. The hidden work is already underway, moving steadily toward revelation, gathering momentum through every unseen adjustment, every quiet correction, every carefully positioned opportunity, and every divine arrangement that is drawing closer to visibility with each passing hour. Yet it is often at this very point that the greatest danger appears, not because the chosen one is moving away from their purpose, but because they are standing closer to it than they realize. One of the most misunderstood truths about spiritual growth is that the moments immediately before a breakthrough rarely feel like victory. In fact, it may often feel remarkably ordinary, confusing, or even discouraging. Many people imagine that when God is about to move, everything will suddenly become easier. They expect confidence to replace uncertainty and clarity to replace questions. Yet, experience repeatedly reveals a different pattern. The closer a person comes to a significant turning point, the more tempted they become to abandon the journey altogether. This happens because human beings naturally judge situations by appearances. When progress is visible, faith feels easy. When results can be measured, our perseverance seems reasonable. But there are seasons when outward evidence appears to contradict inward conviction. The chosen one senses that something important is approaching, yet circumstances seem determined to suggest otherwise. Doors remain closed. Challenges intensify. Delays continue. What was once exciting begins to feel exhausting. It is in these moments that many people make a critical mistake. They assume that resistance means they are moving in the wrong direction. They interpret difficulty as evidence that nothing is happening. They conclude that because the path feels challenging, the destination must no longer be relevant. Yet some of the greatest opportunities in life are preceded by periods that test commitment, patience, and trust. A student often faces the most demanding examinations near the completion of their studies. An athlete encounters the greatest physical strain shortly before reaching a higher level of performance. A traveler may experience the deepest fatigue just before arriving at their destination. In each case, the challenge is not proof of failure. It is evidence that something meaningful is requiring greater strength. The test does not exist to destroy progress. It exists to reveal whether progress has produced endurance. A chosen one must understand that breakthroughs are not merely about receiving something new. They are also about becoming someone capable of carrying what is received. This is why preparation often includes testing. It is not punishment. It is refinement. Gold is purified through fire, not because it is being ruined, but because impurity. Ifs are being removed. Character develops through pressure because pressure reveals what comfort often conceals. Many people pray for greater opportunities while resisting the very experiences that prepare them for those opportunities. I desire growth without discomfort, strength without struggle, and wisdom without challenge. Yet the qualities that sustain lasting success are rarely formed during easy seasons. Patience develops while waiting. Courage develops while facing fear. Faith develops while answers remain unseen. This is why the period before a breakthrough can feel so deceptive. Nothing appears to be changing, yet everything is changing beneath the surface. A temptation to quit grows stronger because the reward has not yet become visible. Doubts become louder because certainty remains out of reach. Old fears attempt to reclaim territory that faith has fought hard to gain. The mind begins asking questions that seem reasonable. What if nothing happens? What if the waiting was pointless? What if the promises were misunderstood? These questions are not unusual. Nearly every person who has experienced a significant transformation has encountered moments of uncertainty beforehand. The difference is not that they avoided doubt entirely. The difference is that they refused to allow doubt to become their guide. They continued moving forward even when emotions suggested retreat. They remained faithful even when circumstances offered little encouragement. What makes this stage particularly challenging is its ordinary appearance. Rarely does the final test announce itself as a test. It often disguises itself as another routine day, another disappointment, another obstacle, another delay. A chosen one may not realize they are standing at the threshold of change because the scenery appears familiar. Yet some of life's greatest turning points arrive dressed in the clothing of ordinary moments. How many opportunities have been abandoned just before fulfillment? How many dreams have been surrendered because the final stretch seemed too difficult? How many answers were already approaching while people convinced themselves that nothing was happening? These questions reveal a painful truth. Many individuals do not fail because they lacked ability. They fail because they stopped believing too soon. An enemy of breakthrough is often not opposition itself, but discouragement. Opposition can strengthen determination. Discouragement quietly erodes it. Opposition is visible and therefore easier to confront. Discouragement operates internally, convincing a person to withdraw before victory becomes visible. It whispers that effort is wasted, that waiting is pointless, and that perseverance no longer matters. But the chosen one must remember that appearances can be misleading. A seed beneath the soil may appear lifeless while growth is actively occurring. The horizon may appear unchanged moments before sunrise. Islands may seem empty while preparation continues unseen. The absence of visible evidence does not mean the absence of progress. Sometimes it simply means the process has not yet reached the point where it can be observed. And so the challenge is not merely to endure hardship, but to remain attentive during it, to continue listening when answers seem delayed, to continue trusting when results remain hidden, to continue walking when certainty has not yet arrived. Because the very moment that feels most ordinary, most frustrating, or most disappointing may be the moment standing closest to revelation. The final stretch before fulfillment, a quiet threshold where unseen preparation begins moving into visible reality, and where those who remain faithful discover that what seemed like another obstacle was actually the doorway they had been approaching all along. And standing at that doorway requires something many people struggle to maintain: the refusal to be governed by fear. Fear is one of the most persuasive forces a human being will ever encounter. It rarely appears as an obvious enemy. Instead, it disguises itself as caution, logic, or self-protection. It speaks in reasonable tones and presents convincing arguments. It tells a person to wait a little longer, to trust a little less. Could expect disappointment before hope can take root. Over time, fear can become so familiar that people mistake its voice for wisdom. The chosen one must learn the difference between wisdom and fear, because the two are not the same. Wisdom observes reality without surrendering to it. Fear observes reality and immediately assumes the worst. Wisdom prepares for challenges. Fear becomes paralyzed by them. Wisdom acknowledges uncertainty while continuing forward. Fear demands certainty before taking a single step. One strengthens the soul. The other slowly confines it. This is why fear has prevented so many people from stepping into the very things they were created to experience. Opportunities have been missed because fear exaggerated the possibility of failure. Relationships have remained broken because fear magnified the risk of vulnerability. Callings have been delayed because fear insisted that inadequacy was stronger than purpose. Our entire seasons of life have been spent standing before open doors while fear convinced individuals that safety could only be found by remaining exactly where they were. What makes fear particularly dangerous is its ability to distort vision. It rarely changes reality itself. Instead, it changes the way reality is perceived. A challenge appears larger than it truly is. An obstacle seems more permanent than it actually is. A temporary setback begins to look like a final defeat. Under the influence of fear, possibilities shrink while problems expand. The mind becomes occupied with everything that could go wrong and loses sight of everything that could go right. The chosen one is not called to live as though difficulties do not exist. Faith is not pretending that obstacles are imaginary. Faith is recognizing that obstacles are not the highest authority. There is a profound difference between acknowledging a storm and surrendering to it. One accepts reality. The other grants reality more power than it deserves. The chosen are not distinguished because they never feel fear. They are distinguished because fear does not become their master. Consider how often fear focuses on outcomes that never occur. Entire nights are spent worrying about events that never happen. Countless opportunities are avoided because of consequences that never materialize. A human imagination can become a factory of unnecessary suffering, creating scenarios that exist nowhere except within the mind. Meanwhile, our real opportunities pass unnoticed because attention has become consumed by imagined disasters. This is one reason God repeatedly calls his people to trust. Trust redirects attention away from what fear predicts and toward what God promises. A fear says, "Look at the size of the obstacle." Trust says, "Look at the one who remains greater than the obstacle." Fear says, "What if everything falls apart?" Trust says, "What if God has already prepared a way through this situation?" Fear constantly searches for reasons to retreat. Trust searches for reasons to continue. There are moments when the chosen one will be tempted to interpret uncertainty as danger. The future is not fully visible. Questions remain unanswered. Outcomes have not yet revealed themselves. Fear quickly steps into these spaces, offering its own explanations. It suggests that uncertainty must mean failure is approaching, yet uncertainty often precedes growth. Every meaningful journey contains unknowns. Every significant transformation requires movement into territory that has not been completely mapped. If people waited until every question was answered before moving forward, very little would ever be accomplished. The great moments of life are rarely entered with complete understanding. They are entered through trust. A person takes one step, then another, discovering guidance along the way. A path becomes clearer through obedience rather than before it. A chosen one must also recognize that fear frequently intensifies when something valuable is near. The closer a person comes to breakthrough, the more pressure they may feel to retreat into familiarity. The known feels safer than the unknown, even when the unknown contains the very blessing they have been praying for. A fear would rather keep a person trapped in a predictable struggle than allow them to risk stepping into a greater purpose. This is why courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that something else is more important. Purpose becomes more important than comfort. Calling becomes more important than security. Obedience becomes more important than personal certainty. The chosen one moves forward not because every concern has disappeared, but because faith has become stronger than hesitation. Here may be circumstances right now attempting to provoke fear. Delays may suggest that nothing is changing. Challenges may imply that progress is impossible. Unanswered questions may seem to multiply with each passing day. Yet these conditions do not determine the future. They are merely conditions. They are not conclusions. Fear wants them to appear final when they are often temporary. And as Friday approaches, many will face a choice between listening to fear and listening to the deeper voice that has been guiding them all along. One voice will magnify uncertainty. The other will remind them of every time God remained faithful despite appearances. One voice will focus on limitations. The other will point toward possibilities. One voice will urge retreat into the familiar. The other will call them forward into the purpose that has been quietly unfolding through every season of waiting, every lesson of preparation. every test of endurance, and every unseen arrangement that has been aiding them toward a future greater than fear could ever imagine. And when fear begins to lose its hold, the eyes of the spirit become capable of seeing what was previously hidden. This is often the moment when revelation arrives. Not necessarily in the form people expect, but in the form they need. Many imagine revelation as a sudden burst of knowledge that answers every question at once, yet more often, our revelation comes as a light that shines just far enough to reveal the next step. It does not remove the need for faith, but it provides the clarity necessary to continue moving forward. There are seasons when confusion seems to dominate everything. Questions remain unanswered, circumstances appear contradictory, events unfold in ways that make little sense. During such periods, people often assume they are moving farther away from understanding. Yet the truth is that confusion frequently reaches its greatest intensity just before clarity begins to emerge. The pieces of the puzzle may appear scattered until the final pieces are placed into position. Then suddenly, what once looked random reveals a pattern that had been there all along. The chosen one must understand that revelation is not merely about receiving information. It is about seeing reality from a higher perspective. Facts alone do not transform lives. Understanding does. Many people possess information yet remain trapped because they fail to recognize its meaning. Revelation bridges the gap between knowledge and understanding. It allows a person to perceive not only what is happening, but why it is happening. This is why certain truths remain hidden until the appointed time. It is not because God delights in secrecy for its own sake. Rather, there are lessons that can only be understood after preparation has occurred. A child may hear advanced wisdom but lack the maturity to comprehend it. In the same way, spiritual understanding often arrives when the heart has been prepared to receive it. What once seemed mysterious becomes obvious. What once felt complicated becomes clear. Many chosen ones are approaching such a moment. For a long time, they have been carrying questions. Why did that door close? Why did that relationship end? Why was that opportunity delayed? Why did certain struggles continue far longer than expected? These questions have lingered in the background, creating uncertainty and sometimes frustration. Yet, revelation has a remarkable way of transforming old questions into new understanding. Suddenly, connections become visible. Events that appeared unrelated reveal themselves as parts of a larger story. Disappointments that once seemed meaningless are recognized as necessary redirections. Delays that felt unfair are understood as protection. What appeared to be rejection is revealed as guidance. A chosen one begins to see that many of the things they mourned were actually serving purposes they could not yet recognize. This kind of revelation can be both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it brings understanding. Unsettling because it exposes illusions that were previously accepted as truth. There are beliefs people carry about themselves, others, and even about God that must eventually be challenged. Sometimes revelation confirms what the Spirit has sensed all along. At other times, it dismantles assumptions that have quietly shaped a person's thinking for years. Not every revelation concerns external circumstances. Some of the most important revelations concern the condition of the heart itself. A person may suddenly recognize fears they have been allowing to govern their decisions. They may become aware of patterns that have repeatedly limited their growth. They may discover strengths they never realized they possessed. The greatest revelation is often not learning something new about the world, but learning something true about oneself. This process can feel uncomfortable because truth has a way of removing excuses. Once clarity arrives, confusion can no longer be used as a shelter. Once understanding appears, responsibility increases. A chosen one is no longer able to pretend they do not know what has been revealed. They are invited to respond differently because they can now see differently. There is also a revealing of hidden realities taking place in many lives. Things that have remained concealed are moving toward exposure. Motives that were disguised are becoming visible. Deceptions that operated in darkness are losing their ability to remain hidden. Truth possesses a persistent quality. It may be delayed, ignored, or resisted, but eventually it emerges. What is built upon falsehood cannot remain secure forever. because reality always seeks the light. For some, this revelation will arrive through a conversation. For others, through a circumstance they did not anticipate. Some will receive confirmation through a sequence of events that suddenly make sense. Others will experience an inner certainty that settles questions they have carried for years. The form may differ, but the effect is similar. Confusion begins to give way to understanding. And as this understanding unfolds, the chosen one starts recognizing that many things they once viewed as obstacles were actually instruments of preparation. What seemed like interruptions were often redirections. What appeared to be setbacks were frequently positioning them for something greater. The story was never as fragmented as it seemed. There was always a purpose moving beneath the surface, connecting events, shaping outcomes, revealing truths, guiding them steadily toward a moment when what had been hidden would finally become visible and what had been difficult to understand would begin fitting together with a clarity that changes everything they thought they knew about their journey.